Is global economy in trouble?
I think the global economy is in trouble right now, but we think that the storm that's hitting it right now will likely pass. Part of that is because we do see a truce take place between the US and China. Part of it is because we think the global economy still has enough underlying resiliency to absorb the drags that are working through it now. And part of it because I think policy led by the US Fed and by China policy more broadly is providing an important stimulus that will help on growth as we go through the next year.
Do you think long term it will create certain bubble, certain problem down the road?
Well, almost always medicine has side effects. So I would think that when we're sitting here 2 or 3 years from now, there's a good chance we'll look at the stimulus that was provided today and say, okay, that has created some problems. But I think the benefits of having provided the stimulus now, having avoided the worst outcomes of a global recession in 2019 and 20, is certainly worth it to be able to go forward here. And we certainly will have some issues around it that we'll have to deal with later, but it's hard right now to actually anticipate exactly what the implications of this easing is going to bring.
For sure, China is slowing down a bit.
Yeah.
And do you think that will create certain problem for the global economy, and what does that mean for China?
Well, I think there's a secular story about China's path, which is different than the slowing that we've been seeing over the course of the last year, which is partly about China policy to restrict credit and partly about the trade war. You know, our view is that right now China is likely to be forming a bottom in growth as it makes its way through the end of 2019 and into early 20. And I think an important part of that is the stimulus that has been provided both on the fiscal and on the credit side. It has had a significant impact on the region and the world. And if we're right and we do see this bottoming, then I think China is going to be an important part of what we think will be a lift that in Asia is probably likely to be most pronounced relative to other regions in the world as we move through 2020.
Interesting. 2020 is a big year for the US.
It is.
The election is coming, the impeachment is ongoing, a lot of things are happening here. What does that mean for the global economy and for the US economy?
Well, I would just say this. First of all, I don't know what's going to happen in US politics, but I think it's unlikely that the dynamics that we're thinking about in US politics here as we move towards the election are going to have a significant effect as we move through 2020. I think the outcome of the election, when we see where we are in November of 2020, and we can see not only who the next president is, but how much control they have through the congressional elections, I think that will have an impact. And of course, the implications of what it means for their policies will have an impact. But I don't see 2020 as being heavily influenced by the election season.
Mm-hmm. Final question. Brexit might eventually happen. So what does that mean for the global economy?
I think if we're talking about the global economy, the central issue is whether Brexit takes place in a disruptive way. The news during the summer was very scary, and it started to raise the risk of an October 31st no-deal Brexit. The good news in the last few weeks is it looks like we've removed the near-term risk of that. So I think Brexit now becomes a UK issue as we move towards their election, and we've taken out that risk that Brexit could become a meaningful threat to the global economy.
感谢精英形象顾问品牌 Aris the Mirror 厄里斯魔镜对本节目的支持。